Christmas music to get you in just in the spirit of Christmas. And we'd like to welcome you here to this evening's Farm Office Live for the month of December. And to kick us off, I'd like to just share with you our normal teaching team from left to right. Diane Shoemaker, our OSU Extension Field Specialist in Dairy Production Economics. Barry Ward, Director of the OSU Income Tax Schools and the leader for our Production Business Management. And Peggy Hall, our Director of OSU Agriculture and Resource Law Program. And yours truly, David Marison, Coshocton County Extension Educator. And behind the scenes, we usually have two people, but Jeff, we're putting it all on you tonight because Julie has a night off, but making the magic work behind the scenes and doing all those things to make sure that we're running smoothly. Jeff Lewis, attorney, research specialist in the Ag and Resource Law Program, is going to be behind the scenes monitoring our chat box, our Q&A box, and making sure that we keep everything in order. So thank you, Jeff, for taking this responsibility solely on your shoulders tonight. Just as a reminder, if you'd like the slides for this evening's program, we have them posted and they are up on the go.osu.edu/Farm Office Live website. You can go there. You can grab the slides. You can download them to your computer so you can follow along. If you want to go back and hear a recording of today's presentations, you can go back on. They'll be up probably tomorrow. You can hear that. And because you're here on Wednesday night, if you want to listen to us again on Friday, same program on Friday, and we'll just update it as what we learn for the next 2 days. And that will be held at 10 a.m., 10 to 11:30 a.m. But you can get those slides. And if you want to hear the recording, you can. And if we reference something from a previous Farm Office Live, all the recordings clear back, and we're just saying this, we're almost 2 years into Farm Office Live programs here as we move into the new year, because when the pandemic started in March of 2020, that's when these Farm Office Live programs got underway. And here we are, we're still upright even after 2 years. Questions, we would ask you to direct your questions, and we encourage you to ask those questions. Just drop them into the Q&A feature there on your toolbar. We try to keep the chat clean. We're not checking the chat, but so go, if you have those specific questions, drop those in the Q&A box, and Jeff will be monitoring those. And in fact, the entire team will be monitoring those. If you think of a question in the middle of the night and you want to ask that, don't hesitate to email any of us. But if you only need to remember one, just email it to me at marison.2@osu.edu, and I'll get it to the team so they can answer that question. So we encourage those questions as we move through tonight's program. And as always, we have an evaluation, and as you exit the webinar, it should take you and ask you to open up another screen, and you'll be able to answer that, a quick evaluation. Shouldn't take you very long. Those that have done it before, we appreciate that, because those responses that you give us help us craft the next Farm Office Live. So we would encourage you to do that. And I'll drop that evaluation link into the chat box as we move towards the close of this program as well. So just ask you to do that for us. We do appreciate that. So what do we have on tap for tonight? Well, we have a special guest. The last couple months, we've had a special guest, and tonight is no exception. Cheryl Turner from USDA NASS is going to be with us to talk about a lot of things with the agriculture census. And then from Cheryl, we'll move into one of the hot topics is the 2022 Dairy Margin Coverage Sign-Up Program that's underway, and Diane Shoemaker is going to discuss that. We say we always are looking for the day when the pandemic relief is over, but it continues. And there's two that I'll briefly give you an update on: a meat processing grant program that was released here a couple weeks ago, as well as one federal program that has also been released for our hog producers. So we'll talk about that. And then Peggy, it seems like there's a never-ending supply of state and federal legislation updates that Peggy will be bringing to us tonight. And Barry, he should look exhausted because the last 2 months he's been on the road conducting the OSU farm income tax schools across the state of Ohio. Just got off a fresh all-day Monday farm tax webinar on Monday. So if Barry's looking tired, it's because it's been a long 2 months of talking about taxes clear across the state. So Barry's going to bring a quick update on farm taxes for us all. And then we'll close tonight's session with just looking ahead to 2022. I guess we are going to pontificate a little bit if we have time at the end, just to say what we think about what we would encourage producers to do as we move into the new year. So we'd like to welcome you all to tonight's program. And with that, I'm going to introduce to you Cheryl Turner. And Cheryl, this is the time where you can take control of the screen, but we'd like to welcome a friend of OSU Extension, a friend of agriculture here in the state of Ohio, our state statistician out of the Great Lakes region for the USDA National Agriculture Statistics Service. And Cheryl, we'd just like to welcome you to our program and to give us an update on the agriculture census. And Cheryl, you have to tell us how long you have had a long career. Oh. And that's okay, because all of us on here are old. We're comfortable with those that have a long career, which means that you do your job really, really well. So we're just pleased that you're able to jump on and share some information tonight for us on the ag census.
Well, either I do my job well or they can't find anyone to replace me. I'm not sure which it is yet, but okay. So I will jump right into my slideshow. Let me share my screen here. And y'all have to excuse me a minute. I am technically challenged at times. Okay, see how I did. See, I had it there. I thought I did this. There. Does that look okay?
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay. So what I'm going to start with a little bit is primarily what I want to talk about today is the ag census. We are gearing up for the ag census. It is the 2022 ag census. So I will explain a little bit. First of all, my page down did not work. Ah, there it is. Hold on, let me go back up. Okay, there we go. Okay. So yes, I have been with you a long time. We'll start with that. 30 plus years with NASS. So I would say that qualifies me as old or a senior NASS employee. A little bit of background on myself. I started in DC in research, came out to Ohio around 1990, and I've been here ever since. Have two kids. One's a senior at Ohio State and the other graduated from OU. So we are Ohio and glad to be here. I've been the state stat here in Ohio since 2013. I don't know, probably quite a few of you knew my predecessor, Jim Ramey. I still see him occasionally and he's doing fine. And the job has changed since Mr. Ramey did it, but I view my position as communication, outreach, and recruiting. So that's kind of who I am, but who is NASS? And NASS is the statistical agency of the USDA, and we provide timely, accurate, and useful statistics for U.S. agriculture. That's basically what we do. So NASS today looks different than it did prior to 13. Around 2012, 2013, we did an agency-wide reorganization. So what we got out of that reorg was 12 regional offices. And Ohio is in the Great Lakes region with Michigan and Indiana, and our Great Lakes, the regional office is in East Lansing. It's really just off the edge of Michigan State's campus. And so we have 12 offices. We also have an operations center in St. Louis, and then we have our headquarters in DC. Prior to the reorganization, the Ohio office had around 20 employees, and now there's 2. It's myself. There's always a state statistician and what we call a NASDA coordinator, or the person who works with the enumerators. So it's myself and Brooke Morris, and we have sometimes had people inquire about our positions, but neither of us is leaving anytime soon. So those are not open up. So, but like I said, we have the 12 regional locations, and every state has that is not a regional office has at least 2 employees in it. Most have 2. There's a few like Florida and California that have some special programs that have more employees in it. Okay, what does NASS do? We collect, assemble, process, and disseminate data. We conduct surveys at the state, regional, national level. We conduct the ag census every 5 years. We publish hundreds of reports. I partner with ODA, with Ohio State, any other universities. We partner with them, and we also conduct research. And what types of surveys do we do? Acreage and yield, livestock, county estimates, those are always extremely popular. Organic surveys. We just did our first hemp survey. We're looking at urban farming surveys. We do anything you can think of, even remotely related to agriculture. And in terms of grain prices, grain storage, and of course we do the census of ag. The crux of NASS is our confidentiality. Your data is protected by law from any court or legislative action. The data are aggregated and published in a form that means we cannot disclose any individual data. If per se, like I always give let's say you had 90% of the poultry in Darke County, one operator did, and that's not unusual. Then Darke County data for poultry would not be published. So we do not disclose any individual data. I actually had a gentleman call me up a month or so ago, and he was asking me what the D on some of our reports means, and a D means disclosed. And if you think about it, you can never just disclose one item. You have to disclose another item also, because if you only disclose one item, someone could figure it out. And he was like, well, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to figure out the data. And I said, that's why we disclose. You cannot. But anyway, so we do maintain confidentiality, and the data is protected by US code. I always give the little example of NASS doesn't play well in the sandbox. We will take your data and we will use your data, but we won't give anyone else the data. So we'll play with your toys, but you're not going to play with ours. What do we not do? We don't set any policies. We don't do any regulation. There's no influence over our surveys. We don't disclose individual reports, and we don't favor any groups. No group is favored over another group. Okay, a little background on the census is the first census was conducted in 1840 in 26 states and in DC. And now, 180 years later, it's done in all 50 states, Puerto Rico, Guam, the Virgin Islands, the Northern Mariana Islands, I don't even know where they are, and American Samoa. There's data for more than 3,000 counties and 30,000 zip codes. One other interesting tidbit that I didn't put in the slide was NASS actually started doing the Census of Ag in 97. Prior to 97, it was done by the same people that do the population census. But we took it over in 97, and the census is done every 5 years, and it's a complete count of farms and ranches and the people who operate them. If you look at different censuses through the years, the question content does change as things become, shall we say, fashionable and unfashionable. The question content just does change, but the core of it stays the same. So the Census of Ag is the most complete agricultural data available. NASS actually goes to other countries to help them learn how to collect data. That's how good we are at it. It's also the only source of uniform, comprehensive, and impartial, there's a key, impartial ag data for every county in the US. And we're picking up info on land use, ownership, producer characteristics, demographics, production practices, income, expenditures, and quite a bit more. I mean, you'll see a lot of change in the demographics on what we're asking. There's a lot more interested in minority operations, female operated farms, things like that, that we probably didn't pick up 20 years ago, but we are now. Part of the reason NASS started doing the census in 97 was there was an interest in changing the definition of a farm. And we did not want that to happen. So we have maintained the same definition for, I'm just going to say, a really long time. I don't know how long, but the definition of farm is any operation or place where $1,000 or more of ag products were sold or potentially sold during the calendar year. Potentially sold gets people a little confused, but let's say you have 2 beef cows on your operation and you did not sell them, you're still a farm, because that potential there is more than $1,000. So it's sales or potential sales. Okay, your voice. By participating in the Census of Ag, you show the nation the value of U.S. agriculture. And it's your opportunity. Once every 5 years, you get this opportunity to show how to tell America how you provide food, fuel, and fiber. By responding to the census, you have the power to influence transportation and marketing, farm services, production practices, new techniques. A lot of legislators and people who make these decisions will look at the census, and they'll make decisions based on what census data we pick up. We also have like the Maple program. Ohio is not as big in the Maple program as it was prior to the last census. We are no longer in the survey that's done each year. And that's quite honestly because we didn't have enough maple producers report on the census that they were producing. We firmly believe they're out there, but they were not, they did not report. Okay, opportunity. This is your opportunity. Right now, we are building our census mailing list, and this is your chance to be counted. If you want to complete a Census of Ag, you need to be on our census mailing list. First, I would say, if you were mailed a Census of Ag question in 2017, you will be mailed one again in 2022. And let me clarify that a little bit. If you were in a partnership that no longer exists and the questionnaire went to your other partner, that wasn't a questionnaire mailed to you. I mean, if you specifically got one, you will get one again. But if you're unsure as to whether or not you will get a census, there's a couple things that can be done. First of all, I will be at trade shows this year. I know I'll be at the Ecological Farming Convention, the Beef Expo, the Pork Congress. I'll be at the State Fair, Farm Science Review. There's quite a few shows that I will be at this year, and I will have postcards, just the good old fashioned postcard that you can fill it out and you can leave it with me while I'm at a booth. We also have forms online, and here I've got the web address. I'm not going to read it out loud because I get tongue-tied, but the form out online is probably the quickest and easiest way to do it. Additionally, I have reached out to your local FSA offices, and they can do one of a couple things. They can either help you fill out a postcard, help you fill it out online, or they can give you my information. And do not hesitate to contact me if you have any questions. If you're not sure if you're on the census mailing list, you can contact me. I will not be able to give you an answer right at that moment, but I will pretty darn quickly. Okay, your response makes a difference. We need information from all farmers and ranchers, no matter how large or small. I've had so many people tell me, well, my operation is too small, it doesn't matter. Yes, it does. And I've actually tried to call people's bluff a few times. I had one gentleman that was just adamant he wouldn't fill it out because he was too small. And I told him, contact me. I will come help you fill it out. I called his bluff. He never contacted me. He was like, I live in Ashtabula. You won't come there. Yes, I will. So just contact me and I will make sure you get counted and make sure you get a census. And if you don't know how to fill it out, I can make sure you get help, or I can help you myself. And again, don't forget, your response is required by federal law and protected by federal law. The required that's the one I hate to say. It actually is required by federal law, although I can honestly say I have never heard of an instance where it's been enforced. There is a fine. It is enforceable, but I think it's a $300 fine, and we would look like the biggest idiots of the world if we went after that. Okay, a couple dates to remember. The mail out. I give a date, November 21 of 22. That's hard to say. Is the census mail out. It's actually not one day. There are I can't even remember, 15, 20 semis that go out. So it's a process, but that's when we're planning to begin the mail out. February 6th of 23, that is the deadline to have your completed census into us. And then February of 24 is when the census data will be released and is available to view. Okay, as I said, you're highly encouraged to complete the Census of Ag online. It's got skip boxes for you. It's got drop-down menus. It's a lot easier than you think. You're not comfortable with that, you can always respond by mail because you will get a questionnaire in the mail. More information can be found at this website. One thing I did want to say is, hold on, lost my train of thought. Hold on. Yeah, if we do not receive a questionnaire by February 6th, I believe was the date, we will start doing follow-up phone calls and follow-up mailings. And this is when people do sometimes get a tad bit irritated with us. So the best way to avoid that follow-up contact is to get something into us, because we will keep trying if we haven't heard from you. If you don't feel like you could fill out all the questionnaire, we'll take the best that you can do. The best is far better than nothing. Now, this is non-census related here. This is just a quick jump. I wanted to talk about a couple upcoming releases we have that are usually of interest to people. So on January 12th, we had the annual crop production summer. That's a big one coming out, and always draws a lot of interest. And that will all, let me see, February 19th, farms and land and farms. And then on the 24th of February is the corn and soybean county estimates. I probably get more calls about corn and soybean county estimates and actually crop weather than I do on than anything else we work on. And then lastly, I wanted to say, you have any questions, text me, email me, call me, any of the above are absolutely fine. I can come out and help you with a questionnaire. I can direct you to who you need to get to. You know, if you just want to call and complain about it, I can listen to that too. So I appreciate all your help, and I appreciate you completing the census. Thank you so much.
Cheryl, we do have a question that dropped in the Q&A from anonymous attendee. Who is entitled to the data from farm field? Landowner, farmer, bank, etc. I think you might have kind of covered that, and they might need to be a little more specific on the question, but I'm assuming maybe data from the farm field. So
who is entitled to the data from the farm field? Landowner, farmer, bank. Okay. What I wonder if they're talking about is our objective yield surveys. We actually go out in farm fields for corn, soybeans, and wheat and make objective counts in the field. If that's what they're talking about, the people entitled to that data would be the farm operator. If he calls us up, we will give him the data from that field. And that's it. Other than that, it's not released to anyone. But the operator can get the data for that specific field. If we don't like to give out the data for the field, because you're literally looking at two very small pieces, you know, like in a cornfield, like 2 rows by 15 feet. So it's not always the best area of the cornfield. It's a random area. So, but the farm operator is entitled to that, not the landowner, the farm operator, if that's what he means by that. Other than that, there's nothing else we share with anybody.
Super.
David,
if they want, yeah, Barry.
They may also be asking something that's farm service agency related. In this case, I'm not sure, but if I had to guess, that may be what they're referring to is farm service agency base yield and all of that data, but perhaps they can clarify.
Yeah, and if you clarify, and I see, Cheryl, that Jeff has done a great job of dropping links there to the USDA Ag Census mailing list. They can click onto that to make sure that they're added to that if they're not, as well as if they would like to get a hold of you with your email and your phone. He's dropped that in the chat as well. So Cheryl, we appreciate you coming on.
Okay, that sounds great.
Thank you.
Like
that. Yep.
I have a question for you too, Cheryl.
Yes.
You mentioned that one way people can participate in that survey is to do it online.
Yes.
So will each person that would have received a mailing have their own personal link to do that online?
Yeah, you would get a code that's specific to you, and you would enter that in, and that would bring you to your census questionnaire. And you can even get partway through it and stop and take a break and come back, and it will bring you back to where you ended.
Perfect, because that was my question. Do you have to sit down and do it all at once, or can you pick away at it?
No, you can pick away. And like I said, if the choice is not doing it all or answering 4 questions, I would much rather you have answer 4 questions than not do it at all.
Right, right, great.
Mhm.
Thanks for joining us tonight. That was great information.
Okay, thank you. Let me know if anything else comes up.
Okay.
I'm here.
Super. So now we're going to switch gears. Just a week ago today, December 8th, they finally announced the sign up for the Dairy Margin Coverage Program, which is going to be exactly the same dates as sign up for the Supplemental Dairy Margin Coverage Program. So we're just going to take a few minutes and go over that program. And hopefully that's one that we'll see good sign up in Ohio this year as well. So that dairy margin coverage program is what is now in place for dairy farmers to be able to do some risk management. It replaced the support price that was in place literally for decades. 2022 program sign up started on the 13th, and it will run through February 18th of 2022. And as normal, that will be done all at the USDA County Farm Service Agency offices. Now, at the same time, if you remember earlier this year, for anyone who cares about this dairy stuff, they also announced that there would be an opportunity for farms who have grown between the time the original production history was established, and this whole thing started with the 2014 Farm Bill. So that initial production history for a farm was based on the higher production, the highest production that the farm achieved in terms of milk sold of 2011, 2012, or 2013. So clearly in our industry, it's highly likely that those farms have increased their production since then. So the objective of the Supplemental Dairy Margin Coverage Program is to provide an opportunity for farms who have increased their production to increase that production history as well. And the real focus here is for farms that had less than 5 million pounds of production history. So we'll look at that in a little more detail in a moment. And then the final item that we were waiting on, that we had been told about at the beginning of the year, was that there was going to be an additional adjustment in the feed price formula. So this dairy margin coverage program is founded on protecting a margin between the all milk price and the price of feed. And there's an equation that is used in that calculation, but each month those prices change for corn, for soybean meal, for alfalfa hay. And so there was a change coming, and we'll touch on that for the alfalfa hay in that calculation. So as we look just quickly at this year and last year and how this dairy margin coverage program has performed, it is substantially different than the original margin protection program that was first created in that 2014 Farm Bill. So we're looking at that difference between the US all milk price and a calculated feed cost per hundredweight. So it's protecting a margin. And these are the announced margins that we experienced in 2020. Lost my cursor here. There we go. So in 2020, farms can choose to cover a margin somewhere between $4 and $9.50. So if a farm has purchased coverage at that highest level, in 2020, we had 6 months where an indemnity payment was actually triggered at the $9.50 level. And, you know, depending on the month and depending on what the coverage level chosen, Farms might have, if they covered a lower or smaller margin, then they might have received an indemnity for some other months as well. But in 2021, this has been a tremendous help for the farms that have enrolled, as we have seen very unexciting milk prices and high feed prices when we look at corn and soybean. And as we look at Ohio, in 2020, there was 2.275 billion pounds of production history was enrolled, 526 farms, so about a quarter of the farms. In 2021, there was a much higher enrollment of production history. And so we're at 3.58 billion pounds, 739 farms. Now, we don't know what coverage level they selected. So some might have been at the minimum of $4, and that has not done anything. But it didn't cost them anything except the administration fee. But for those farms that have enrolled at the higher levels, it's estimated that through September, the indemnities paid was over $31 million. So it's been a really important risk management strategy for the dairy farms that participated. So December 13th to February 18th is that sign up period. There are qualifications that farms need. Farms are enrolled. It's just a matter of going back in. They've done the paperwork. There will be a little additional paperwork for each, as each year is chosen. For farms who have not enrolled, they certainly are eligible to enroll if they commercially market milk and meet the adjusted gross income requirements and so forth. That part of the program, they need to go to their county office and discuss that. This is a unique program in that farms pay to participate. So the minimum cost is $100 administrative fee. And there's actually a process in place for farms who are classified as limited resource, beginning, socially disadvantaged, or military veterans. That fee will be waived. So there's the basic, but a really important thing for farms to look at before they sign up for 2022 is if their production history, to see if they're eligible for this supplemental dairy margin coverage opportunity. So there's a budget of up to $580 million that's been dedicated to this piece of the program with the objective of improving the risk management opportunity for small and mid-sized farms. This is all based on production history of 5 million pounds and less. And at 5 million pounds, we're looking at a 200 to 250 cow herd, depending on production level. So this supplemental program is in effect for 3 years. Farms can choose each year whether, if they didn't go for this in 2022, then they can reconsider if they want to do it for 2023. But it's in effect for 3 years. And okay, so it's December of 2021. What that means is it's retroactive to the first of the year. So that's the important piece where farms need to look at this and sign up for, enroll in the supplemental program, which triggers them for 2021 if they were enrolled in the program. So, but they need to do that before they would enroll for the 2022 dairy margin coverage program. This retroactive to January 2021 is huge for farms that have enrolled at those higher levels of coverage. They had to have been enrolled, for the year already. And if they were, then if they have additional production history that they can now pull in through this supplemental program, then they will be able to have that benefit for that milk production that they've already shipped in 2021. So what does this mean, this supplemental dairy margin coverage program, or how is it being measured is probably the better way to put that. A farm needs to look at their 2019 milk marketing. So milk sold in 2019 Some cooperatives will give an annual summary. Every farm, if they pull out their December final milk check for 2019, that's the one that would come in January of 2020, it will have that year-to-date total production, and that would be their milk marketings for 2019. And if they're, the other important key here is that their established production history is less than 5 million pounds. If that's the case, and their 2019 marketings are higher than their established production history, then those pounds are eligible for this supplemental production history up to 5 million pounds. An interesting point, and one that some farms will come under this umbrella, is there was an opportunity when it was about in 2018, I believe, when they did some updates to the dairy margin coverage program. They added the $9.50 level. And farms that bought up coverage to that $9.50 level and committed to that participation level for several years for the life of that section of the Farm Bill, they received a 25% discount on the premiums for that whole period. So if a farm participated in that, they will still continue to get the discounted premium rate on the original production history. But if they have some qualifying increased production that now will be part of the supplemental dairy margin coverage program, they will pay the full premium on those supplemental dairy margin coverage pounds. And then there's always going to be some farms that came into the industry since then, or ownership has transferred. There are rules and processes in place that you will work with your farm service office to figure out what your production history is. So a quick example, we have a farm and their 2019 milk sold was 4.8 million pounds. And as we look at that, this farm had an established production history. So their highest production in 2011, 12, 13 was 2.5 million pounds. And that does, if they had participated in the program continuously or off and on since that beginning established time, since that was started in the 2014 Farm Bill, they may also have gotten some annual bumps in that production history. So the very straightforward. So it's simply, the milk sold in 2019, which is verified by that milk check or a statement from the cooperative, less the current established production history. In this case, this farm has increased their production over that production history by 2.36 million pounds. Then this program says we'll take 75% of that difference, and these are the pounds eligible then for the supplemental production history, this 1.77 million pounds. Now, if we add those together, their original production history of 2.5 million plus the supplemental pounds, we're just under the 5 million pound cap. So all of that, that full 1.77 million pounds will be their supplemental production history number. If a farm had increased further and that goes above 5 million pounds, it's only going to be the pounds that take them up to that 5 million pound mark that will be eligible to be there for the supplemental coverage opportunity. So then as part of the program too, you can, if the farm chooses how much of their production history they want to cover, the maximum is 95%. So for this farm, for instance, if they chose to cover their production history at the highest level, they basically have two sections to that. First, there's the original established production history, which is currently at 2.5 million pounds. 95% of that gives us the 2.375 million pounds. So that would be covered at whatever level they choose. And then now they can cover more. There's their 1.77 million pounds that are now eligible for coverage as well, if they choose to do that. And the highest level they could, the largest quantity of that they could cover would be 1.681 million pounds, 95% of that 1.77. So when we look at this, before the supplemental coverage option was available, they could cover or choose to cover at most 2.3 million pounds of production. And now the supplemental program allows them to purchase coverage for up to just over 4 million pounds. So it really helps cover more of the actual production. Premiums will be the same. Again, one of our newest and most helpful additions were these 859 and 950 coverage levels. And this is truly a program that's designed to assist smaller and medium-sized farms. They also brought the premiums down to a much more affordable level at those higher coverage rates. Those higher levels are not available for production above that 5 million pounds. And, farms can choose a level of coverage that meets their goals and their comfort level, and the cost varies accordingly. Now, there is a tool available to help select or see what it would cost to cover different amounts of milk at different coverage levels. And so our very helpful dairymarkets.org website, I would go there. You can hit their tab that says Dairy Margin Coverage Program, and it takes you to this tool. And I got to tell you, this tool was not working well earlier today, but typically it's very easy to use and works. But what you'll do there is select the year you're wanting to look at, which will be 2021 for those who might be adding supplemental coverage that's going to go back to 2021. But most likely everyone would be looking ahead also at 2022. You plug in your production history, you choose what coverage level, there's drop down boxes there. And if we're under this 5 million pounds, you're going to select a coverage level here. And for instance, this example shows 5 million pounds of production history, 95% coverage, and they've selected 950, 100 weight coverage, a margin of 950 per 100 weight. That costs 15 cents per 100 weight. So the total premium that the farm has to pay is $7,125. So they can look at different combinations, different coverage levels, and select something that works in their budget. And then the final thing I just wanted to touch on quickly was that alfalfa hay feed cost formula. There were some concerns that the formula was not really reflecting the cost of high quality alfalfa that goes into dairy diets. And so before, it was using the price for half of the price was based on premium hay, the other half was based on hay. And so that's been changed. The formula will use 100% the premium price for alfalfa hay. That too is retroactive to January of 2020. So farms who were enrolled or are currently enrolled and participating in 2020 in dairy margin coverage, you will automatically, you don't have to apply for anything. That process will automatically be carried out by Farm Service Agency, and the difference between indemnities using the old formula and the new formula will be automatically passed to those who are participating. So lots of good stuff happening there, David, and we'll be doing some a little more detailed programming on that, and Farm Service Agency offices are ready to work with farmers in their counties.
It's a great update. Good relief for our dairy farms, no doubt. And probably if it's anybody who needs time off at the Christmas season here, it's our Farm Service Agency office, because over the last almost 2 years, they've been doing some incredible heavy lifting, continue to get incredible lifting. And I'm going to just keep on rolling on that theme, Diane, with just some pandemic relief programs. Seems like we're always right before we have one of these farm office lives. We have some action that comes out. Well, this one we knew was coming, and it finally was released on December 2nd. And this is the Ohio Meat Processing Grant. So keyword there, grant. Now, if you remember, Peggy shared this back last year about House Bill 110, huge bill, 2,500 pages of information to sift through there that was passed in the last General Assembly. But part of that bill was this Ohio meat processing. In fact, it was the meat processing investment program was part of that. And this is to help our current processors for meat and poultry processors here in the state of Ohio that were in business before July 1st, or as of July 1st, that they would be eligible for grants up to $250,000. And that program was again was announced on December 2nd. That application portal opened up last Tuesday at 10 o'clock. So those applications are there, and that application program is going to stay open. It's a first come, first serve basis. From what I can tell, that's about $10 million of money that is available in that program. A lot of supply chain issues we saw during COVID, especially in the processing sector. So some money for these processors to do new graded machinery upgrade. It could be included some personnel training costs, could be some expansion for their plants for whether it's confinement, processing, refrigeration, even some food safety certification costs that would fall under there. So I know most of our processors across the state of Ohio have gotten an email on this, but just wanted to make sure that people knew that that was there. Sure to come, I think maybe some federal money from the federal side that will help out our meat processing sector as well. But wanted folks to know that that's there. First come, first serve. Next, this happened this week. It happened on Monday. We had the email Monday afternoon about a new round of pandemic relief for swine producers. So our Farm Service Agency offices had 2 days to gear up for this, because that program's application period started today, and it will go through February 25th. So this program, called the Spot Market Hog Pandemic Program, again, was announced this week. It looks like there's $50 million worth of assistance available. This is tied back to the CARES Act money that we've been talking about through this entire pandemic. But again, it is for assistance for the hog industry, for those market hogs that are sold through a negotiated formula, and for those pigs. And we're looking back again, we're going back to last year. So these were for some of that disruption that occurred, between April 16th of 2020 through September 1st of 2020. Those that were in negotiated sale formulas. If you want more information on that to see if you're eligible, of course, call the local Farm Service Agency office in your county. Just to know about the eligibility and what kind of money is available for this program. Eligible is a $54 payment up to 10,000 head. So the maximum there would be $54,000. Of course, there are some limitations there as far as net income that have been applicable to some of the other programs. But again, that program opened up just today. So information came out on Monday. And here we are underway, and that program payments, that period to sign up is going to go through February 25th. So producers got a couple months to get that done. But again, just as another program for our swine producers. And for those that like that picture just a shameless plug for tourism here in Coshocton County, those are actually Mangalista pigs, woolly pigs. So you could do a Google search on that. But near and dear to our hearts and our tourism industry here in Coshocton County is the Woolly Pig Farm Brewery outside of Fresno, Ohio, that makes some of the best craft beer that you'll taste. but they also raise these woolly pigs. So you want to come out and spend some time over the holidays. We encourage you to come to Coshocton County and check out the Woolly Pig Farm Brewery. And then this is just a reminder from last month for organic producers or those producers that are in the transition process. The OTECP programs, part of, again, the pandemic assistance programs, there's $20 million to just provide assistance for fiscal years 20, 21, and 22. So that's your October through September period. And that is to help our organic producers. Mentioned this in our last webinar series in November about the different specifics of that, but for organic producers, this will help them give a little relief, a little bit of money for certification, as well as doing some soil analysis for micronutrients. Those kind of that assistance is available. So applications are underway, have been since November. We talked about it last month again on Farm Office Live. But just as a reminder, about 3 weeks here for organic producers to check that out and get into the FSA offices to talk about this organic and transitional education and certification program. And just as I mentioned last time, I know many Barry's hot off the tax schools, but we're talking about maybe some higher income this year. But again, just we really, really appreciate our Farm Service Agency partners and the programs that they offer, just the work that they've done through the whole pandemic. But part of this, again, just to keep reminding producers, this farm storage facility loan program, it's pretty something amazing in my part. The fact that you can look at some loans down to a 3-year loan at 0.6%, 1% for a 5-year loan, 1.375 for a 7-year. So for those that are looking for grain bins or new hay barns or cold storage, some excellent loans out there for producers to look into, up to $500,000. So encourage you to check out your Farm Service Agency office and talk about these farm storage facility loans. So with that, Peggy, I think I'm going to bounce it to you and have you go on with Ohio and federal legislation. It never stops.
It never does, David, and thank you for covering that. And it was good to see the woolly pigs as piglets. I've seen them as those huge hogs they turn into. So
they are much cuter as piglets, you say.
They're pretty cute. So let's start off with Ohio legislation, and then I'll move into federal activity. I want to tell you about a few interesting newly introduced pieces of legislation this week. I don't know if it's Christmas or what, but there's some strange new pieces of legislation that I thought you might find a little bit humorous. You know, whenever we can find humor in the law, we have to take it. And this one came up. Now, this has been around, I think, for as long as I've been around, this proposal that we're going to completely repeal the individual income tax. And sure enough, it came up again just December 9th. And I checked, it was referred to committee today. So that's a sign that maybe they're taking it somewhat seriously. So there's that resolution to repeal the individual income tax over on the Senate side. And then we also have some interesting newly introduced pieces on the House side. The first one would name the walleye, and we could have a debate about this, David, later, but the walleye as the official state fish. And then House Bill 507, which would change the number of chicks that can be sold in a lot, and it would reduce that to 3 from 6. So as I said, some interesting things going on down at the State House this week with new ideas they're throwing about. But if we start to look at the older ideas that have been around and are making their way through both sides of the House, we come to the Ag Link Deposit Program. I know I was talking to Barry earlier. He went down to the State House to testify on that one, and that's been moving. I've told you about that now for a couple of our Farm Office Live sessions. It did pass the House on the 9th and just had its 4th hearing today. It was not reported out, I don't think, of committee, but is expected to be. So that should soon be at the governor's desk for that change to the ag link deposit program that would allow our ag co-ops to qualify for that program and receive those loans, and would also lift that $150,000 loan limit that's currently in place and allow the treasurer to determine appropriate loan maximums according to the applications. We also have the statutory ag lease bill that I've told you about before too, that would establish a statutory requirement for those leases that do not address termination to have the landowner, if he or she wants to terminate, would have to provide a written notice of termination by September 1st in order to terminate that lease that doesn't otherwise address termination. And it did pass the House this week, and it was just today introduced and referred over to the Senate Ag and Natural Resource Committee. Some of my slides haven't been updated with the hearings that went today. So you won't see some of that information on the slide. So I'll try to remember to tell you what did happen today. The auctioneers bill that I've also mentioned in previous sessions of Farm Office Live did also pass. There was a very, very busy day in the House on December 9th. They passed quite a few bills and many coming out of the Ag Committee that we were interested in. So that has now passed the House, and we'll wait to see what those changes do over on the Senate side. That changes the oversight and apprenticeship requirement for our auctioneers in Ohio. Apparently, we have a bit of a shortage, and this is intended to address that. So that one's moving. And the beginning farmers bill, slowest bill I've reported on this year, did have another hearing on the Senate side. It passed back in June on the House side and received its second hearing December 7th. I was hoping it would be back this week, but it wasn't, but it's slowly crawling forward. So looks like we may see those certified beginning farmer credits, and the both for those who sell assets to certified beginning farmers and for beginning farmers who become certified and take those financial management programs. Looks like that may make it yet. Probably not this year, but soon. And then we also had the post-nuptial agreement bill that has now gone over to the House side and been assigned to the Civil Justice Committee. That passed the Senate. If you'll recall, last month I talked about that, and that would change our legal agreements between spouses, allowing spouses to change a prenuptial agreement with a post-nuptial agreement. That's something that many states allow, but Ohio has been a bit behind on that. And so it would allow modification of those agreements after marriage. Interesting. And then there's a couple of tax bills here that I just discovered these, and I'm trying to figure out what significance they will have. And so I'm going to have to pull Barry in on this and have him take a look at it. But I just wanted to alert you all to these two tax bills. They also received additional hearings today, yesterday. The third hearing was yesterday over on the Senate Ways and Means Committee. And this first one would allow you to elect an income tax on a pass-through entity's income. And my understanding is this would allow alignment with some federal credits. But again, we're still taking a close look at this and trying to sort it out. I know that in the hearing yesterday, there was opposition testimony, and that opposition testimony cited impacts on general revenue funds as well as the public library funds. So we're going to sort that out and see if it really could have much of an impact on Ohio, and keep an eye on it to see, or on Ohio Ag, see what it will do. And the same with the Senate Bill 247, which received its third hearing yesterday as well. I didn't see any opposition testimony on this one, but this would allow the sale of an ownership interest in a business to be considered business income if it meets certain requirements. And again, this, actually, I think I misspoke on the last one saying that would allow federal tax credits, this is the one that would play into federal tax credits. So we need to take a look at those. Just want to alert you that those are there, and we'll report more on those next month after Barry and Robert Moore, our tax person, has a chance to take a closer look at them. As far as legislation that's not really doing much, I've reported on all of these before, and they seem to be stalled for the moment. So we have that ephemeral features bill that would exclude those ephemeral features, those waters that result from rainfall, from water pollution control programs. That one seems to be stymied right now in the House. The overtime pay bill that would exempt certain minimal tasks from overtime pay is also on hold, as is that income tax credit that was just recently introduced, but doesn't seem to be gaining any traction, that would allow income tax credits for donations to townships of either cash or property. And then we have that constitutional right to hunt and fish that would be put onto the ballot. That motion is not gaining any traction yet either. So there we go with state legislation. And a reminder, if you want to read about these, I do give articles on both state and federal legislation regularly on the Ohio Ag Law blog, which you can sign up for and receive in your inbox. And then I'm
Peggy,
moving. Yes,
There's
go ahead.
First, before you move out of Ohio, a question through the Q&A came. The
Yes.
9/1 termination on the lease legislation that you
Yes.
referenced. They asked, must be sent or received by 9/1 by September 1st. I'm assuming that's received
Must
by.
be given. Well, it's
must be
given, so
given.
it would be, yes, the owner would have to give that notice by then.
And what mechanism would they be required? Is that a
Written.
certified
It would have to
letter?
be written. It doesn't have to be certified, but it would have to be written. And we always avoid text as that written notification. It should be a written letter, but it does not have to be certified.
Beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so going over or going down, I guess, to DC and looking at federal legislation, we have a few things to update on this mess that I've been creating here the last few months for you on Farm Office Live, trying to keep track of those major bills that Congress has been tending to. And you can see my updates in yellow highlight. So that's what's changed from last month when I showed you this chart. And I just heard, I believe it was just this morning, I heard something on the government funding. What was that? Did anyone hear that? Can anyone help me? 2.5. Oh,
They
boy.
raised the debt ceiling 2.5 trillion, I think.
Thank you. I was thinking it was 2.5. Okay, good. That just happened. So we could update this again, and I'll have to do that, I guess, for Friday's program. But looking at the government funding then, that second short-term bill did pass December 2nd that would extend funding to February 18th. And the full year appropriations bill is expected by February 18th when that date does arrive. So we have that. The debt limit is the one that Barry was just talking about. The first procedural bill that was necessary for that to happen did pass earlier, much to the surprise of many, with some bipartisan support. And so passing that procedural bill that would allow the increase to occur with just a simple majority happened last week. And then, as we said this morning, it looks like we're looking at a 2.5 trillion increase there. So that was expected to go next week, but it's moving along. Nothing on the infrastructure bill, of course, as that's being implemented. And then when we look at the Build Back Better reconciliation bill, we had that 1.75 trillion passed November 19th, just as we were meeting last month on Farm Office Live. And Schumer is saying that they're going to tackle it by Christmas, but everyone, I think, is highly skeptical that that will happen. So it looks like we're still just going to be waiting on that one. And many people think it just is not is not going to happen. So we'll see next month what we have to update on that chart. Looking at the CRS report that was issued on Build Back Better, you can see the ag provisions in a little more detail. I tried to show you some of those last month, but now they've got those numbers laid out in a little more detail that see where that money would go under Build Back Better when we look at agriculture. And you can see that there's quite a bit going pretty evenly to forestry and conservation. Both of those types of programs there, a lot of money. And I know the Senate is talking, if indeed they pass it, in increasing even more that conservation technical assistance funding that would come. And then up in Subtitle C, we have the rural development funds there coming in a little less than those. And then ag credit and research and miscellaneous funding coming, bringing that total as we thought before that you see there in the bottom right-hand corner. So just a little more details on what we think could happen if it would happen, but we're a little skeptical whether it will actually happen. When we look at the House side, they've been active, and they always are more active over in the House Ag Committee than the Senate. The Senate is still doing a lot, hearing a lot of testimony, doing a lot of research, accumulating information. The House is starting to act. And as I had said before, the House Ag Committee had passed these bills out last month, and no, it was actually the month before. And now they reached the House floor and were passed December 8th. So several of them that I want to fill you in on here, that National Forest Restoration and Remediation Act, and the Chronic Wasting Disease Research and Management Act, both did pass the House, as did, excuse me, the Cattle Contract Library Act. A lot of interest there from the livestock sector on that one. The House passed that, and the Senate has indicated a lot of interest in that, but they may change that into the bill that's proposed over there by Senator Thune and Fisher. So we have the Cattle Contract Library that would allow some additional transparency in the livestock market there for cattle. And then we also have the House passing the extension of authorization for the livestock mandatory reporting, another transparency issue. And so they have passed that and would extend that authorization to September of 2022. So a lot going on the House side as far as legislation getting to the floor and going through. The House also passed the Ocean Shipping Reform Act that I talked about last month in our session here, and that would address some of those supply chain issues that are coming as a result of international shipping practices and those containers that are being sent back without our farm goods being loaded. And so this bill did pass the House, and there is definite interest in the Senate. So I think they will act on this one pretty quickly. And that would be Senator Thune again and Klobuchar have their companion legislation ready to go on the Senate side. And then just to give some insight into where we might be next month over in the House, they've already indicated that they are going to start Farm Bill hearings in the early part of the year. And the Senate has already suggested that they are willing to take on the Growing Climate Solutions Act, but that they plan to revise it somewhat significantly. So we know that those things might be happening next month when we come back here for Farm Office Live. All right, and that concludes my legislative report. Barry, to you.
All right, thanks, Peggy. And I'm not certain if my screen looks okay. Does it look okay? It doesn't, does it? Oh,
No.
See all
apologize.
blue, beautiful blue.
Okay, sorry, folks. Having some technical difficulties, and I'm not certain exactly why. Let me try this again.
Barry, I always think those are livestock cages of some sort behind you when you have that background, but you're in the library, right? That's the OSU library.
Would like to be. How does that look?
There you
Great.
go. Good.
Okay. Sorry, folks. Once in a while, I have a glitch. Okay, I'm going to give just a little bit of an update on some income tax issues, and we'll talk a bit about some review. We'll talk about some things that we've already discussed, and also a couple of new things. We're going to talk about tax planning for high income years, a little bit on employee retention credits, a little bit more on the Build Back Better Act and what might impact producers if and when it does get passed, and some online resources. And of course, I have my shameless sharing of my grandchildren, some photos. Okay, so let's talk about tax planning for higher income years. And I know we have talked about this a little bit in the November sessions. And David has also been involved in teaching throughout the state and some webinars as well. We've talked about some of these issues, as this is going to impact some producers this year with some of the higher ad hoc program payments and the higher prices. It's not going to be all producers, but there are going to be a significant percentage of producers that will have to deal with high net farm income, and we'll try to mitigate that a little bit by using some of the tools that are available for cash basis taxpayers. The first bullet, the first check that I have there is deferring taxes or deferring sales, deferring payments. And oftentimes we're just looking at pushing sales into the next year. It's a fairly simple process. In some cases we have delivery and we're just deferring the payments until January, and that does occur frequently. One of the things that farmers and fishermen have access to is income averaging. This is a tool that only farmers and fishermen can use. And one of the things that the IRS has pointed out is that this tool, this method of smoothing income is underutilized. So if you have a high income year this year and the prior 3 tax years were fairly low or moderate income, you should certainly look at income averaging and have a discussion with your tax practitioner as a tool to help you smooth some of that out, push some of that income back into those prior years and take advantage of some of those lower income tax brackets possibly. The other thing that we have listed here is utilizing prepaid expenses, and this is something that a lot of producers use. The one thing that is a little bit of a problem this year is just finding enough product to purchase. We know that there are shortages out there in fertilizer, crop protection chemicals, other supplies that producers, some of you, normally purchase to offset some income. So that, even though that's a tool, it's available, it's something that might be a little less useful this year, just simply because we may not have as many products out there to purchase. The other big tool that's utilized is accelerating depreciation. And also we're running into some problems here as well as we look to purchase machinery and equipment towards the end of the year to help offset some income and utilize either bonus depreciation or Section 179 expensing if we can find the equipment to purchase. And that's the big part of the issue right now. Other ways that we can help offset some income and lower that net farm income: retirement plan contributions, taking full advantage of those, bunching itemized deductions, which all taxpayers can use, but it's certainly a way that farm families and farm businesses can offset some high net farm income. Self-employment tax planning, and one of the specifics we're looking at here is if you have multiple entities, and oftentimes producers will set up multiple entities, and often it's multiple LLCs, where we have one that owns the land and one that has the ownership of the operating part of the farm, and the landowning LLC or entity will rent that land to the operating entity, and therefore we can avoid that self-employment tax on that particular rental income. So that's something to consider. If you're not already set up in that kind of an arrangement, it might be something to consider for the future. One of the things also that has become a little bit more valuable is the possibility of hiring children and allowing them to offset their income with their own standard deduction. And since we no longer have, at least from now until it sunsets, part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we no longer have personal exemptions. So we have this higher standard deduction, and that could be meaningful, especially if you have children that are already working on your farm. We can go ahead now and just pay them as the parents and allow them to offset that income with that standard deduction. So that's a cost saving, a tax saving measure possibility as well. Okay, want to talk a little bit about the employee retention credit. And there are going to be some producers that still may qualify for this. This is a pretty valuable credit as we look at it. And it's not too late to take advantage of this for 2021. It's a fully refundable payroll tax credit. It can exceed the payroll tax credits or payroll taxes due even, and you may get some wages back. And it's gone through a number of changes. It started early last year with the CARES Act. It was modified by the Consolidated Appropriations Act, extended by the American Rescue Plan, and then further revised by the latest act, the Infrastructure Act. And what that did is cut off this credit at the end of the third quarter. So now we have access to this for the only 3 quarters of 2021. And I'll go through how you qualify again here. This is the important piece right here. If you have gross receipts that are less than 80% of the same quarter in 2019, that will trigger your ability to qualify for this employee retention credit. So this is a lower hurdle than we had in 2020. So some of you may qualify in 2021, even if you hadn't considered qualifying in 2020, because the way to qualify is much easier. We just have to have gross receipts less than 80% of the same quarter in 2019. And if you qualify in one quarter, the next quarter automatically qualifies. How do we claim this? Well, we reduce the payroll tax deposits by the amount of the anticipated credit, and we're going to claim that on Form 943, that payroll return. And also one of the things that we finally got guidance on this past year is that the Paycheck Protection Program loan forgiveness income, if you will, is not going to be considered a part of your gross receipts. So that does not need to be counted as you're calculating whether or not you qualify. One of the things earlier back in 2020, when we first had access to the employee retention credit, we weren't allowed to take both the employee retention credit and qualify for Paycheck Protection Program forgiveness. Now we can. Okay, the Consolidated Appropriations Act late in 2020 allowed us to take both of these. Now we cannot use the same wages for both. So if we're going to look at wages for qualifying for both, we've used those for PPP loan forgiveness. We can't use those for the tax credit for the employee retention credit. It's not income to you as the employer if you do receive this employee retention credit. But one of the things that you do have to do is you have to reduce the deduction on your tax return. So if you're going to qualify and take this employee retention credit, you will have to change your income tax return along with your payroll return. What does it amount to? Well, that percentage has increased as well. It's gone from 50% to 70% of qualified wages. There's limits, $10,000 per employee per quarter now in 2020. So this can be substantial if you qualify. And since it's only 3 quarters, we can qualify. If you qualify for all 3 quarters in 2021 for your employees, you can claim up to $21,000 in credit for each employee in 2021. It's 3 quarters times 10,000 times the 70%. So it can be substantial. Okay, moving next to the Build Back Better bill, which Peggy has already discussed at least briefly. And well, all the gyrations that this has gone through since it first came out as the American Families Plan. It's now morphed into this Build Back Better bill, not fully passed or signed. We're not even clear as to whether or not it actually will be at some point. But if it is in its current form, there's very little that's really impactful for farm families on the tax side, the pay-fors for the bill, if you will. There have been some significant pieces in earlier forms of the bill. We had concerns about taxation of capital gains at death, especially for appreciated assets and land. That's no longer in the bill, and also a change in the estate tax or the unified credit, if you will. So that was considered, and the bill was considering lowering that to the Pre-Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of $5 million per person modified for inflation. That's no longer in the language either, but we still have this piece, the net investment income tax. This is a 3.8% tax. It's a surcharge, if you will, imposed by the ACA to pay into Medicare. And previously or currently, it's only assessed on investment income. The Build Back Better bill would change that if it's passed as it is, and change that to include all income of trade or business. So trade or business income, so your Schedule F income, would be included if you're a taxpayer with more than $400,000 in income, or $500,000 for taxpayers that file jointly, or $250,000 for married filing singly. So that may be impactful, especially in high income years for certain producers. There's a number of other pieces that go along with this, and Peggy has laid out a few of those as she talked about the overall cost of this bill and what that's going to do in each of the titles. Just pulling out a couple, well, 4 of them here. There's going to be highlights, if you will. Paid leave for caregiving. The child tax credit would be extended a further year. Premium tax credit would be available to more individuals. That's the tax credit that helps those pay for health insurance on the health insurance marketplace. And the SALT deduction would be increased from $10,000 to $80,000, according to the language, at least the latest that I've seen in that bill. So there's lots of pieces that we're following in that bill, and we'll see. I guess we'll see what happens. Some resources. Of course, we need to point out the Farmer's Tax Guide, and I think we did that last month, but that's available online, and we'll have hard copies in many of our extension offices. Also, I want to point out something, and I know David and I have talked about this in the past. Really good website, the ruraltax.org website. This is designated and really a website that's dedicated to farm returns and information on farm tax returns. A lot of good information here. Here's the link. Also, there's a number of fact sheets or tax topics that you can choose from, and some very good information. If you don't find what you need in the Farmer's Tax Guide, I would look here, and this is also a very good resource. This just shows what a couple of the fact sheets look like. Taxability, for instance, of CFAP payments is one, and then also defining who's a farmer for tax purposes. This is just 2 of the many, and really good information that you can access. Okay, and that brings me just to the end of my comments, and it's been my pleasure to be with you, and my contact information. So, David, I will turn it back over to you.
All right, Barry, as we're switching here, there was just a reminder in the Q&A about for depreciation, for that accelerated depreciation, to make sure that people remember that has to be constructive receipt.
Placed in service.
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep, that's an important piece. I mean, the farm machinery is supposed to be on the farm and ready for operation if it's going to be expensed, if we're going to use either a bonus or Section 179 expensing.
Great. Appreciate that tax update. Yeah, and Peggy, I was talking before the webinar went live. My thoughts of Barry's background, same as yours. It looks like he's got maybe chicken cages or something, but I guess that's cages of knowledge behind him.
It's the
So-
main library at Ohio State, but maybe they could store chickens in there too. I don't know.
They might be able to. So I guess we're going to end it here in a short few minutes that we have here. That the topic that the team threw out there was, what might 2022 bring? So I guess this is where we sit back, rub off the crystal ball and say, what's 2022? Or maybe some of our, Cheryl, you mentioned about being, I think I wrote senior. So we're all seniors here in our profession. So what do we see going forward?
Well, Jeff's not, but don't lump him in with all of us.
Yeah,
but-
Jeff's our young person. Hey, and Jeff, great job. I hope you've been watching the chats, because Jeff's been dropping every link in there. And as participants know that you can download that chat, so you could just download that the chat right to your computer, so you have all those hot links for yourself for all the things that we're talking about tonight. So I don't know who wants to start. I'm just going to throw it out there.
Boy, I'll say first, of course, everyone knows we're dealing with higher input costs and dealing with strategies for how to manage that. There's a lot of uncertainty. I think it's going to be one of those things where we continue to follow this very closely, and perhaps we space out our purchases a little bit, maybe more so than what we're used to doing, so we don't lose any opportunity for lower prices if they do happen in late spring, or it's hard to say at this point what fertilizer prices are going to do, what crop protection chemical availability and prices are going to do. So not putting all our eggs in one basket. I know that flies in the face of many of our strategies of buying in bulk, buying everything at once to take advantage of volume discounts. So that's the other side of the equation as far as input purchasing, and that's going to be one of the big concerns for producers going forward.
I don't know if we can top that, Barry, but I appreciate the census work that Cheryl does, because I feel as we move into 22, and this is just David speaking, that I feel a lot of our mid to smaller producers might get pinched in 2022. So they're going to have to be pretty on top of the game, because I know our larger producers with some of our cooperatives and agribusinesses are probably going to get serviced first. So I appreciate your thoughts about making sure that you're locking in some prices as we go, maybe not put all your eggs in one basket. I was talking to a smaller producer the other day and said, the co-op said, yeah, well, we can lock in $900 urea price, but we can't guarantee that we can deliver it. So, and I'm telling him, no, if they want you to lock in $900, then they need to guarantee that they can deliver. So there's going to be a lot of tough discussions between chemical dealers, seed dealers, fertilizer dealers as we move into the holiday season here. So, and I know there's something I think Diane would perk her ears up is your working capital. Make sure you're protecting some of that money as you're going into the next year, because you're going to need that. That would be my advice as we're moving into a higher input time, is protect some of that working capital that you have.
Well, there's some, we are going to have higher incomes here this year compared to a lot of years, and the real challenges of income tax management this year, where you can't take constructive receipt of things that we never would have thought twice about before. And there's myriad offers coming across my desk at the farm with, give us this much money early without committing it to anything in particular, and we'll pay you interest on it. And that's come from multiple entities. I don't know where their tax advisors are, but there's some real potential challenges there. And just like you said, David, protecting cash is going to be really important. And the fact that it's there right now, we need to budget to make sure we have it when we have those opportunities, Barry, to maybe make some good purchases when those pop up. And we do have particularly in dairy, for farms that, for whatever reason, some it's church related, that don't want to participate in anything that a program that's government related. This has been a very challenging year for farms without any price protection, with lower milk prices and higher feed prices. And we're going to continue to lose some dairy farms here in the next 6 months.
I think it'll be interesting to see if any of these pieces of legislation that deal with transportation, shipping, supply chain, movement, if they'll have much of an impact in the coming year. I mean, I'm hopeful about it, but I don't know that it will have enough of an impact. And likewise, I think we have a lot coming in conservation funding. What that will do to the bottom line, though, is certainly not all that optimistic, but I think there'll be a lot of dollars going out, David, and you'll have a lot of programs to report on next year for conservation-oriented funds, but will it be enough to help deal with some of these difficult times coming up, I think is a question that I would like to say yes to, but not sure I can.
And Peggy, I'll say I would vote for the walleye for the fish.
Oh, you
too.
would?
I
Okay.
would vote for the
Okay.
fish.
Yeah.
I'm in that, yeah.
So we have 2 walleyes. Diane and Cheryl, do you want to vote? Jeff, what's your vote? Walleye, or should we go? What would the next best alternative be?
Well, I always catch bluegill, so I think that should be the state fish.
I'm gonna have to go with next best. I'm not a walleye person.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
probably don't want to go catfish, aren't they bottom feeders? Want something a little more exciting than that.
Hey, David, sorry to change the subject away from fish because I do like fishing, but I think we might want to mention also interest rates. Chairman Powell, the Fed, talked today about increasing, of course, the tapering that they're doing, and also the possibility of 3 rate increases this next year. So that would be up to between 75 and 100 basis points. So that's likely going to mean higher interest rates for producers next year. We'll see. You know, the pandemic continues to kind of have its ups and downs. So whether or not the Fed follows through on that, but likely there will be increases. And if you have mortgages that are higher than maybe where they will be, maybe it's time to refinance and capture some of these lower rates and some of those long-term notes.
Does seem
Sorry,
to be
that
a
was-
push right now for refinancing, more so than it's been in the last month or 2, I've noticed. Yes.
Oh,
All right.
Well,
David,
with that,
you've
Cheryl,
you've
yeah,
silenced us.
this is that never happens with this group. So silence. So Cheryl, we appreciate you being on, and we just encourage producers and those professionals that work with our agriculture producers just to kind of remind them that, you know, the timeline is we're moving into that next census period, and that census is so critical when it comes to these funding programs, about getting an accurate representation of what's happening across the state of Ohio. Because bottom line, those numbers match up to how those dollars are allocated across the country. So we just want to make sure that our Ohio producers are getting that census and that they're going to answer that.
And I appreciate the opportunity to talk to everyone. Just a little FYI too, as the federal government has been working remotely since March of since almost 2 years now, our enumerators hopefully are going to be able to get back out in the field. We have been conducting all of our surveys via internet, phone, and mail. No personal contact since all of this started. So hopefully we can get back out there again soon. That's what we're trying to do.
All right, with that, I think I'm going to share my screen. We're going to, Jeff, thank you for being behind the scenes.
Have yourself a merry